Welcome to Reality is Undefeated. I'm at Gatewood. Thank you for tuning in. You know, as lame as it may sound today, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a bus driver when I grew up. I was always fascinated with anything transportation, planes, trains, airports, bridges, tunnels, just anything. We took the bus a lot when I was a kid, and in order to get me to sit still, my mother would give me the transit guide and I would look at the map of the routes, and that's how I learned my city. This is way before I ever picked up a basketball, way before a microphone. We talking like 7 years old. So at the age of 21, with my hoop dreams already behind me and rap doing nothing but costing me money, I applied to drive transit. I remember interviewing with this black man named Maurice, very smooth, soft-spoken guy. And at the end, he told me, "We'll give you a call." Well, as he's walking me out down this very long hallway, we're talking to avoid awkward silence. And I don't remember what we were talking about, what he said, or what I responded. I just remember we stopped walking and was only talking. And that "we'll give you a call" turned into a "can you be back at 4 p.m. to take a drug test?" And like I told y'all before, I've never smoked, so passing a drug test is going to be a piece of cake for me. So fast forward a few months now, I'm a driver. I'm in a shuttle car, deadheading from one yard to another to go and pick up some buses. There's 3 other drivers in there, one of them a sister. And just like today, back then when I would have casual conversations in environments that I felt comfortable in, I would curse a lot. And I remember her asking me like, "Do you gotta curse so much?" And I have a very bad habit of being dismissive towards people when I don't like the things that's coming out their mouth. So in a very dismissive way, I said, "It's just how I talk." Well, unbeknownst to me, she had gone and written a report about how much I cursed and how it hurt her soul and some other nonsense. And I'm not calling it nonsense to be dismissive of how she felt. I'm calling it that because of who she proved herself to be later on down the line. I remember it was a Saturday. I came into work and headed to the dispatch window. And when I got there, instead of being assigned a bus for my run like normal, I was actually told to go with these 2 gentlemen who were standing in the area. One was Byron Goins, senior customer service manager. The other was Terry Jenkins, senior supervisor. Mind you, it's a Saturday. They're not even supposed to be there. I remember Terry had on a sweatsuit. They came in just to talk to me. They brought me to this office, sat me down, made some things very clear, and made sure I understood what they were saying. And when I left that office, I didn't leave feeling like I had just been scolded. I left feeling like I had 2 brothers in positions directly above me that had an interest in seeing me be successful, and they both would show it. Byron formed a company basketball team. He would have me pulled off of route just to go hoop, and he would pay me for that time. That decision would actually cost him his job. Terry, man, I don't even know where to start with Terry. I don't know where to start when it comes to the things that he's done for me. Like most companies, they had a dress code, and part of that dress code was wearing all black shoes. But remember, I'm 21, 22. Being fresh is mandatory. So I'm driving in black and gold Iversons because our shirts were tan. Well, I used to work a lot of overtime, and when you worked overtime, you would spend a lot of time just sitting in a driver lounge, waiting for someone to call in, waiting for a bus to break down or something like that. Well, the GM walks in and he sees me in these black and gold Iversons, and he comes over and talks to me. But remember, he's saying something I don't want to hear, so I'm dismissive. I'm great at just looking you up and down, and going right back to doing what I was doing. So he goes and talks to Terry. Well, Terry came out and talked to me, told me how the GM came and talked to him over the color in my shoes and how he wants him to send me home. But instead of sending me home, Terry asked me what size shoe I wore. I told him 11 and a half, 12. He brought me out to the parking lot, popped the trunk on this late 90s S500 Benz, pulled out a pair of lightly worn all black K-Swiss Classics and told me to put them on. Told me he didn't want me losing money because of a little color in my shoes. And mind you, I was working overtime. There was another day where I put in for vacation, but was denied because the scheduling lady said I didn't put it in on time. Well, I had already booked this trip to Chicago, so I was going regardless. So I go and talk to her, and she's like, "All right, I will give you every day except for one. This one day I need you to show up because I'm understaffed. Of course, I told her, cool, but remember, I'm in my early 20s. I'm taking every one of those days off. Well, fast forward. I don't know what the reason was. It may have been because I was late or because I called in a day, but I ended up over the limit of, they called them miss outs that I could have, right? And so I'm over the limit for miss outs. I got to go sit in front of Terry. Terry calls me into the office, reads the paperwork. He's like, all right, well, let me see what I can do. He picks up the phone and he calls the scheduling lady, tells her the jam that Mr. Gatewood is in and if there's anything we can do. And the scheduling lady told him, I can't do nothing for Mr. Gatewood because Mr. Gatewood didn't show up on the one day that I needed him to show up, even when I gave him vacation time when I didn't have to. And Terry looks at me and he says, is this true? I say, yeah, she ain't lying. And he tells her, all right, well, thank you. Hangs up the phone. And then he looks directly at me and he says, boy, you are real. I got all the respect in the world for you, but my hands are tied. There's nothing I could do on this. I'm going to have to suspend you indefinitely. And this is going over the top of my head. I couldn't do nothing but respect it. So I turned in my badge, left the building. I lived maybe 15 minutes away at most from the job. I promise you, I didn't even make it all the way home before Terry called me and told me to turn around and come pick my badge up. Terry called the other scheduling lady, and she was willing to change some things for me. Not only did she take away the miss out that would have gotten me fired, basically, but she took away a few others and gave me breathing room to be late or call in again if need be. This is all on the strength of the relationships that Terry created in the building with multiple people. I'm sure that, if I didn't mess it up with the first scheduling lady, she would have been able to do that simply because Terry was asking her to. Terry would be demoted because he wasn't firing people when they wanted him to fire them. I would drive transit for 4.5 years. And when I would leave to go and drive tour bus, I found myself again being, the youngest in an industry. And I also found myself again being taken under the wing of a number of older brothers like Thomas Lewis, Mike Ramos, Dwayne Bennett, Tommy Thaxton, Daryl Rich, rest his soul, Anthony Lee, rest his soul, Walter Durden, rest his soul. These are the brothers that taught me how to make money. They taught me how to dress and present as a professional. And when I had an issue with a passenger, not only did they teach me how to deal with that issue, but they taught me how to prevent that issue going forward. They didn't have to teach me any of this. They didn't benefit from any of it, but I benefited tremendously. I took my family on trips 3 times a year. I made over $100,000 6 of the 8 years that I drove tour bus. After 4.5 years of driving transit, I made $15.50 an hour. Those brothers did not have to unlock that for me. I say all of that to say this. When you have grown-ass men around you, they shape you into moving like a grown-ass man. When you see a young man carrying himself below standard, that means the men in his life are below standard themselves, so the well-being of his future doesn't interest them. I work around men all day, every day. Men with knives, screwdrivers, big-ass wrenches, saws, hammers, power drills, nail guns, metal pipes, benders, rebar, just all kind of shit around to mess someone up with. You want to know what I see every day? Very high levels of masculinity, very high levels of energy. In fact, this energy drink's discarded everywhere. Very high levels of confidence and bravado, very high levels of respect, and very high levels of concern for one another. Of course, there are incidents every now and then. It's a lot of shit talking, and sometimes people aren't in the mood. But it never really amounts to anything because the men around do not allow things to get out of hand. We are not going to allow you to mess someone up. We're not going to allow you to mess up your family name. We're not going to allow you to mess up your reputation. And most importantly, we will not allow you to mess up your ability to provide for your family. We will not allow that shit. When things get heated, we're going to tell you to take a walk. In fact, we'll take the walk with you. And on that walk, we're going to explain to you all the reasons it's not worth it. And after you've had time to clear your mind and think about it, maybe sleep on it. If you have any decency in you, the next morning when you come into work, you're going to thank that person because they had your best interest in mind when even you didn't. See, the world, in my opinion, does not need less of men. The world needs to let men be men and stand clear. I know with all of the mental health awareness that we're coming into, we want to get rid of the stigmas that exist. A man should never cry. A man should never express his emotions or feelings and a host of other things. And I understand all of that. Men carry a lot, some more than others. And it's unhealthy to go out into this world full of unknown variables and conditions that are less than ideal. As someone who's had the closest person to him take his life, I am fully aware of how important mental health is. However, we cannot rid our society of the standards that a man should possess in the process. A man always standing between his family and harm is a standard that needs to be upheld. A man always standing on his word is a standard that needs to be upheld. There is and always should be such a thing as moving like a man. And in order to master this, a young man has to be around men. You know, this is probably a little over a month ago now, but my wife told me that she saw a woman changing a tire on the highway while a man that was with her just stood there looking at his phone. And look, I'm not even here to talk down on anyone today. I've had a great day. I've had a great week. It's just not the energy that I'm on. Hell, for all I know, she could have been a master mechanic or, she could have been a rideshare driver and he was the passenger. But what I will say is this, even if I didn't know how to change a tire as a young man, my protective instincts as a man would not have allowed her to change that tire in that situation. We both would have been on the other side of this barrier waiting on AAA. And if I didn't have roadside assistance, that would have been the day that I learned how to change a tire. At the very least, we would have been changing that tire together. And even if she was a rideshare driver and I was the passenger, my protective instincts as a man would have made it to where I was at least motioning traffic to get over a lane while she did her thing. There would have been no just looking at my phone. We both have an interest on getting this car back on the road. And see, to me, that's the fundamental difference between men of quality and men who lack in that category. A phrase that I've heard a lot lately, and I think Brother Vance Elliott Wright mentioned it last, is being on code. And brother, I 100% agree. Men in our communities need to be on code. The problem is, where's the code? How do the young men, especially the small percentage who don't have a father, receive this information? What's in the code? What do we identify universally as being the code of conduct amongst men in our communities? This is something we don't talk about a lot. It's because we feel like it's supposed to be innately programmed in us. But as we can see, that's not the case. What we need is for the respected men of our communities to architect this code by living the standards they want others to adhere to. Because whether we know it or not, the code is written by our actions. What a young man understands as being code is based on the actions that he's seen from the men around him. When we open the doors for our women and extend a hand to help them get out the truck, and we walk on the traffic side of the sidewalk, and we pull out chairs before they sit down, that's code. When we call them out their names, raise a hand to keep them in check, or restrict their movements by any other means, some young men also see that as being code. When we marry them and start a family, that's code. When we impregnate them, leave and call them a baby mama, that's also code. When we call each other brothers instead of niggas, we're writing code. And I'm proud to say my generation rewrote the hell out of that code. I think when we say being on code as a man, what we're trying to describe are the intangibles that we saw in the men that raised us or were around us. In my opinion, the most important thing for a man to protect outside of the well-being of his family is his integrity. His actions have to always line up with his words, because if they don't, then who the fuck is he to talk about anything other than how trifling he is? Who would I be to talk about codes, standards, and principles if I was moving differently than how I'm talking? You know, as of this past Thursday, my wife and I have been together 20 years. I just turned 39 years old yesterday. That means I have been with that woman more than half my life. So when I talk about family, togetherness, sacrifice, My words say the same as my actions. What code am I showing my son? We have to be the example we're trying to set. That has to be the foundation, because these young men need to see what we're talking about. The best thing any of us can be is a walking, talking embodiment of what's important to us, not just the image. Some people can look the part. Some people can dress the part. Some people can act the part. But how many are the part? How many Denzel Malcolm X's are there? Or Denzel Alonzo Harris's? How many Leo DiCaprio Howard Hugheses are there out there? How many Heath Ledger Jokers are there out there? When it comes to men playing the part of men, I am proud to say the parts I'm made of came from quality donors. It is my position that having quality men around is a necessity for a young man to be successful. I've come to understand the phrase, "they didn't have to," is only seen as such to those on the receiving end of good deeds. See, earlier I spoke of Byron Goines, and I've recently learned that his father, Theron Goines, was a pillar to his North Las Vegas community for over 60 years as an educator, school administrator, and he served on the city council for over 20 years. He and his wife of over 60 years have a park and an elementary school named in their honor. I only learned this by reading up on Pamela Goines Brown, the current mayor of North Las Vegas, their daughter, Byron's sister. So when I look back at how Byron came in on his day off that Saturday in early 2007, from my perspective, he didn't have to. But I now understand that from his perspective, it was all a part of his duty as a quality man that he was raised to be. Byron and men like him are the reason why every day when I wake up, I'm ready to report for duty. And that will never change. Y'all enjoy your night.